Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling the money side of things, specifically making stuff using living cells fermentation.
hmm
You shared some pretty detailed material on how costs get estimated in this field.
Yeah,
Our mission today is really to unpack what these costs actually are and, why they matter so much. Give everyone a clear picture of the economics involved.
absolutely. Understanding the economics of fermentation is really key. Doesn't matter if you're building a plant, investing, or just, curious how these bio-based products get priced.
Okay, right. So your notes basically split costs into two big buckets:
Yeah,
capital costs and operating costs. Let's start with capital. It's the initial big spend to get everything going, right? Like the down payment.
exactly. It's the big upfront investment. And this breaks down further. You've got your direct costs.
Okay.
That's the actual physical stuff, the fermenters, the big tanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the machines for processing whatever comes out.
Like centrifuges, filters.
Precisely. Centrifuges, filters, chromatography skids, maybe,
Hmm.
plus the utilities, boilers, chillers, and all the supporting gear like pumps, pipes, the works.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, and don't forget installing it all.
Oh,
The sensors, control systems, the actual buildings, maybe even the land itself.
right. The tangible stuff. You can touch it.
Exactly.
And then you mentioned indirect costs. These sound a bit more hidden.
Yeah, less obvious, but totally crucial. Think engineering, design work, fees for contractors who build it. And a really important one, a buffer for unexpected stuff.
The contingency.
Contingency costs, yeah. Could be like 10, maybe even up to 25% of the project cost. It covers the unknowns.
That makes sense. Things always pop up.
Always.
Yeah.
Plus, you have costs for getting everything started up, validated, proving it works correctly, and navigating all the legal and regulatory hurdles. It adds up.
Okay, so that's the big initial outlay, setting up shop. Now, what about keeping it running? Operating costs, the day-to-day bills.
Yep, these are the ongoing, recurring expenses,
Yeah.
what it takes to keep the process actually running. And a huge one here is raw materials.
What goes in?
What goes in? What the microbes eat. The carbon source could be glucose, could be molasses, something cheaper maybe. The nitrogen source, ammonium salts, yeast extract,
Uh-huh.
other nutrients, buffers to control pH, anti-foams,
Mm-hmm.
everything in that growth media soup. This is often a major chunk of the operating budget, surprisingly big sometimes.
I bet. You're constantly feeding the beast, so to speak.
Exactly. Then you've got utilities, powering the whole thing.
Right.
Electricity for stirring those big tanks, pumping air in, running all the downstream processing equipment. Steam is big too for sterilization. And cooling water fermentation generates heat.
Oh, yeah, I gotta keep things cool.
Plus the cost of the water itself, for the process,
Mhm.
cleaning, cooling towers.
Okay, what else? People, right?
Labor, absolutely. Salaries, benefits for the production folks, the quality control team, maintenance staff, people power.
Mm-hmm.
Then consumables and supplies, things you use up and replace.
Like filters again?
Yep, filters, membranes for separation, maybe resins for purification, chemicals for extraction or cleaning, lab supplies, safety gear, packaging materials.
Gotcha. Lots of little things.
They add up. And waste disposal, can't forget that. Dealing with the leftover biomass, the spent media, maybe solvents, potentially hazardous materials depending on the process, that costs money.
Right. Dealing with the leftover.
Maintenance and repair, too. Keeping everything running smoothly. Routine upkeep, fixing breakdowns, buying spare parts.
Standard factory stuff.
Pretty much. And finally, you have overhead costs, kind of the fixed bills, rent, or if you own the plant, the depreciation, taxes, insurance, basic site utilities, security, general administration, quality assurance functions, maybe some R&D support allocated to the plant.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of different cost components. So we've got the initial capital investment and then all these ongoing operating expenses. How do companies actually, boil this down, figure out if a process is actually profitable? I saw metrics like COGS.
Yeah, COGS, cost of goods sold. Yeah, that's a key one. It focuses mainly on the direct costs of production. Raw materials, direct labor involved in making the product, direct utilities used, and the factory-related part of the overhead.
Okay, the core production costs.
Right. Then you have total production costs, which is broader. It includes COGS, but also other operating costs, depreciation from the capital investment, maybe allocated R&D, admin, marketing, everything.
Got it. And the really important one.
The unit production cost, that's your total production cost divided by how much product you actually made, say, cost per kilogram or cost per liter. That's the number everyone watches. Just pricing tells you if you're competitive, if the whole thing is viable economically.
Crucial number. Okay, so what makes some fermentation processes cheaper than others? What are the big factors that swing the economics?
Good question. Several big ones. First, Obviously, the value of the product itself and what the market will pay for it. High-value pharma products can absorb much higher costs than, say, bulk chemicals. Then scale. Production scale matters. Generally, making more stuff at once lowers the cost per unit. Economies of scale are very real in fermentation,
Bigger is often cheaper per unit.
usually.
Hmm.
Then, critically, how well the process actually performs. We look at titer, yield, and productivity TYP sometimes.
Okay, break those down.
Titer is how much product you get in the broth, like grams per liter. Yield is how efficiently you converted your raw materials into product. Productivity is how fast you make it grams per liter per hour, getting more product, more efficiently, and faster. That directly slashes costs. These are huge targets for process improvement.
Makes total sense.
What else? Downstream processing,
Hmm.
getting the product out and purified after fermentation. This part can be surprisingly complex and expensive, sometimes more than the fermentation itself. So the efficiency there is vital.
Right. Purification can be tricky.
Very. Raw material costs, we mentioned that finding cheap, reliable feedstocks is essential, especially for lower value products. Utilities costs, being energy efficient, saves a lot of money. Regulatory requirements play a role. If you need to follow strict GMP, good manufacturing practices for pharma or food, that adds complexity and cost for validation, quality systems, etc.
Compliance costs.
And finally, just where you build a plant. Location affects land costs, labor rates, utility prices, transportation logistics. All that infrastructure stuff matters.
It really is a complex web of factors.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to recap, we've looked at the two main buckets, capital setup costs and ongoing operating costs. We saw how those feed into key metrics like COGS and that crucial unit production cost. And we touched on the big levers that influence the final economic scale, process performance, purification, raw materials, a whole range.
Exactly. It's definitely not simple, but understanding those core elements, the capital, the operating, the key metrics, and the influencing factors, that gives you the foundation for analyzing the economics of any fermentation process.
It's fascinating considering, all those variables we just discussed, from the specific microbe you choose to how you design the purification train to where you even build the factory. It really makes you wonder, when companies are looking to cut costs to optimize, where do you think they typically find the biggest bang for their buck? What are the go-to areas? And what kind of really tough trade-offs might they face when they try to squeeze those costs down? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for this deep dive.